Yesterday we started 6.7, which is inverse relation and functions. Yesterday you learned what the difference was between opposite, reciprocal, and inverse. Let's just revisit that for a minute. What's the difference between opposite and reciprocal? Opposite means what? Change the sign. Reciprocal means flip the fraction, the numerator and denominator. And then what is an inverse now? What did we do with inverses?
You flip the x and the y.
We switch the x and y's. Okay? So inverse, you switch x and y around. So that's what we did yesterday. So if I gave you a relation, such as this, 0, -5, 1, -4, 2, -3, 3, -3, the inverse is all of these points are flipped. That's all that is. So what you should have done yesterday for homework, and it's on YouTube, you were supposed to graph these three relations and then graph their inverse on the same graph. Then, how do you take a relation that's written in as an equation, and how do you write the inverse of that? Well, you simply switch the x and y around. So for this one, y is equal to 2x plus 8. You're going to make your y value your x, and your x value your y, and then resolve it for y. And then we use that for these, we use that fancy function notation, f -1 of x. You don't want to call them both y. One is f of x is equal to 2x plus 8, and the other one is f of -1x. f -1x is equal to 1/2 x minus 4. Okay, so these were homework from yesterday. Now I want to go a little deeper into these problems, starting with this problem number 3. We're going to look at other types of functions and how to find the inverse. So this is a one we did yesterday. Y is equal to 2x plus 8. Can someone tell me, what does this thing look like if I were to graph it? What is it? Y is equal to 2x plus 8. Is it a square? Is it a rectangle? Is it a circle? It's a straight line. This is a linear function. Is this a function? Well, let's look at some points. How do you graph this? There's 2 different ways to graph this relationship.
Start at 8.
You can, start at 8. And by the way, 8 is right at the top here. Start at 8 on the y-axis and then do what?
Round 2 over 1.
Yep. So you remember how to graph it the y-intercept way. What are these dots that I'm putting? What are these points that I'm putting? These are ordered pairs that satisfy this relationship. So if I were to make a table, 0, 8, that's that point. So in other words, if I put 0 in here, 0 times 2 is 0, 0 plus 8 is 8. Now, since I'm going this way, this is off the graph. I could put a 1 in here, but I'm going to get a 10 and it's off. So let's go the other way. If I put a -1 in here, in this equation, what do you get? 6. If I put a -2 in, what do I get? 4. -3, 2. Now, how do you do the inverse? Well, there's 2 ways. You can flip these points. What's the inverse of 0, 8?
8.
What's the inverse of -1, 6?
6 -1.
How about -2, 4?
4 -2.
And how about 2, -3?
2 -.
I'm sorry, -3, 2 is 2, -3. Let's plot these points. Where is 8, 0? I am sorry, but I cut this off. It should be right there. And then 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 1. And then we have 4, negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have 2, negative 3. And I just want to look at these points. I mean, you could keep going, but I want to show you. See this point right here? This is called 0, 8. What point is the inverse of this one? It's this one right here. This one is negative 1, 6. Where is this inverse point? Right here, 6, negative 1. This one goes with this point because this is negative 2, 4. And then here is 4, negative 2. So these two are inverses. And these two are inverses. And you can keep going. Okay, so if I were to connect the dots here, this is the inverse line. Now, is our regular function, this relation, this one, is this a function? Is it a function? Does it pass the vertical line test? Does it? Look at this line right here. Does it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
No?
Wait, just that one line? or both?
Yeah, just this one
Oh,
line.
yeah. I
Just
was
this
talking about
one
mine
line.
together. Yeah.
So this is a function. So you could have named this f of x is equal to 2x plus 8. That's what this line is called. This is called f of x is equal to 2x plus 8. What are we going to call this line?
F negative 1 by 2 twice the same.
What's the name of this equation? Does anyone know? How do you do that? How do you take this equation and find the inverse equation of this? What do you do?
X equals.
You're going to switch x and y around and then do what?
2y plus 8
Whoops. 2y plus 8, thank you. And then what?
minus 8 equals 7.
You're going to resolve this for y. Now, some of you guys like the y value on the left. If you want, you could do this. This might make it easier for you. That's just a suggestion. You don't have to do that, but if that helps you, just switch it around. Now, go ahead. D'Angelo said subtract
8
8
and then divide by 2.
and then divide by 2.
Everything by 2.
Everything by 2. Thank you. So this equation is y equals 1/2 x minus what?
4. Negative.
Now, where is this? Whoops, I forgot the x. Y equals 1/2 x minus 4. Guess what equation this is? That's the one we just graphed. If we look at it closely, if you begin at negative 4 and go up 1 and over 2, look at that. Now, is this a function? Is the inverse a function?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
So guess what? Instead of writing y here,
Right
we don't want to call them both y. What are you going to name this as?
Negative 4 to the x.
We have to name this the inverse. We have to signify that this is the inverse. So this equation is f negative 1x equals 1/2 x minus 4. Questions? Now, we could go a little deeper into this. You could predict, remember how you do the vertical line test to see if something's a function? Well, because the inverse is everything gets switched, instead of a vertical line test, you do a horizontal line test. If you draw a horizontal line in the graph, if you were to draw a horizontal line through this function, if it hits in one spot, and only one spot, we can predict that its inverse will also be a function. So instead of doing the vertical line test, we look at the horizontal line test to predict whether the inverse will be a function. Now, did anybody notice anything cool about this graph? There's some symmetry. Does anyone know where the symmetry lies? If I were to take this line, y equals x.
Flips over.
Yep, right there. So that's another thing you can check for. If you can fold this piece of paper where my pencil is, this line should land right on that line. If I were to pretend like this is folded, imagine this graph is folded in a 45-degree angle right here, and I'm going to draw a broken, here is the line y equals x. Sorry, I'm going a little crooked. If you were to fold your graph along this line, you will see that this graph lands on that one, and that's another indication. And they all do that. Well, are we simply looking at just straight lines? No, we have to look at other types of relations. Do you guys remember what this is called? When the x value is squared and the y value is to the first degree. Remember what this is? You learned it last year and the year before. This is a quadratic function. What does it look like when you graph? Is it going to be a straight line?
No.
Is it going to be a square, a circle, a parabola? What does a parabola mean? It's a U-shaped figure. Now, there are so many different ways that you can graph this. And I'm sure whoever you had last year, the year before, they probably spent a week on how to find the vertex, how to find the axis of symmetry, how to make a table. There's so many different ways, and it's not my concern right now to go over all of those ways. Hopefully you retain some of that and you can go forward with different ways to graph this. Okay, what I'm going to do is have you do this on the calculator. I want you to take your calculator and I want you to graph y equals x squared minus 1. How do you graph y equals x squared minus 1? Well, if you're using the Inspire, we're going to add a graph. We're going to type in x squared whoops. Sorry guys, I hit enter too fast. Okay, x squared minus 1. And there it is. Now, how am I going to construct this graph on here? Does anyone remember what to hit? We need some points. Control T. And now we have a table. Can you give me, I don't know, 5 points? Now, what you're going to look for is symmetry. And here it is, right here. I want you to look for this. Look for where the y values start to repeat. There's a repeat, here's a repeat. Now, here's 8, and I bet you if I go up one, that y value is going to be 8. So which point does not repeat? This one right here. See this -1? You don't see a repeat. This is called what's that point that does not repeat? What's that called? Vertex. 0, -1. So what I want you to do is make your table 0, -1, that's your vertex, and give me two more points to the left and to the right. So we have -1, 0, and we have 1, 0, and we have -2, 3, and we have 2, 3. And I want you to plot these 5 points. You should be able to take this and graph it. Now, it would be a bonus if you could do this without the graphing calculator. So 0, -1, and 2, 1, 2, 3. So what we have here is the function y equals x squared minus 1. Now, can we rename this equation? Yes. We can call this f of x is equal to x squared minus 1. Why can we rename this as instead of y f of x? Because it's a function. Now, when we do the inverse of this one, can anyone predict whether or not the inverse is going to be a function? There's two ways you can do this. Is the inverse going to be a function? Why not?
Because there's 2 3s and a y.
Okay, so I heard something. If you flip these points, I think, Kaylin, this is what you said. Maybe not. Did you?
Yeah, there's 2 3s.
If you invert your x and y's, what do you see happening here?
There's 2 x's.
She says there's 2 3s and there's 2 zeros. So the inverse is not a function. So when you go to switch the x and y around on this equation, you can't use this f negative 1 of x because the inverse isn't a function. You can't call yourself a doctor or a lawyer if you didn't earn that degree. You can't call this f negative 1 of x and rename it if it's not a function. It's not a function. So when you do the inverse of this one, let's do it. How do you write, how did I teach you yesterday how to find the inverse of a function? What do? Instead of y equals x squared minus 1, what are you going to write? X equals,
y squared minus 1.
yep. And now resolve, and I'm going to rewrite it. How do you resolve this for